Hello, and welcome again to Thresholds. My name is Susan Hollins, and I'm a grief therapist and shamanic practitioner living in Fife, close to sea and forest. In Thresholds, I share reflections about the crossroads where psychotherapy and shamanic practice meet, where we honour grief as a sacred rite of passage rather than something to be endured. And today, I want to speak about something that isn't always acknowledged when grief is talked about. I notice that we often talk about grief in thoughtful language. For example, we speak about emotions, about processes. We might even talk about stages, or even further about computing our experience. In all this, we're trying to understand what grief is, what it's doing to us, and what we might do about it or with it. But today I want to talk about the wildness of grief, its rudeness, its tumultuousness, and its capacity to lift us out of our ordinary behaviours. For when someone we love dies, our moorings are loosened, and the structures that hold our lives together, the daily things, suddenly feel incapable of holding this overwhelming tumult which is so alien to us. For grief reaches into the deeper parts of ourselves, lying beneath the ordinary, tidy-ish, everyday, taking us back and reminding us of our physicality, and that we still have primal elements in our natures. Over the many years in which I've supported and accompanied people in their grieving and mourning, I've noticed so many ways in which people express their grief, and today I want to share with you 3 different ways in which the wildness of grief has been experienced. Many years ago, I heard about a parent whose adult child had been killed in a car crash. Some time after the funeral had taken place, the mother went to her child's grave and there removed her underwear to sit bare-arsed on the earth which covered the body of their beloved child. Some might find this a shocking thing to have done, because it takes us out of our polite experiences. But it was as if the parent's body was desperately trying to close the distance between the living and the dead, as if they were trying to birth their child again, to connect through the birth passage. This mother's experience reminds us that grief isn't simply a rational thing. It resides in our bodies and in the deepest layers of our human attachments to others. It takes us out and away and beyond social convention, into areas in which we behave weirdly, oddly, and perhaps not only to ourselves and others, as if we're slightly mad. But such experiences, these things which we are led to do, driven to do, express something profoundly human about us, which is that we need so desperately and naturally to reach, to hold, and to remain connected to and with our loved one who has gone from us. And again, I supported and accompanied a young parent whose little one had died very suddenly and unexpectedly. And some time after the funeral had taken place, they began to visit their child's grave regularly, often daily and certainly weekly. Sometimes they would take something to eat, a chocolate, and leave it there. They would stay and talk to the little one, to tell them about their life without them, to tell them about their younger sibling. Sometimes the parent was joined by their partner and other close family and friends, and on birthdays and at Christmas they would all gather. At birthdays, to bring birthday cake and eat it there, to talk with one another and to the little one, to remember and to mourn. And similarly at Christmas, bringing a gift or gifts, to eat, to be with one another, to be with the little one, to talk, to remember. These weekly, regular visits weren't rituals. They were simply what their hearts needed to do, keeping the thread of love alive in their world where the physical, immediate presence of their little one was no more. These patterns settled into their ordinary family life. I remember too supporting and helping an older mother whose adult son had died after living all his life with a disability which he'd had from birth. Understandably, naturally, the life of this boy as he grew up was intertwined with the life of his parents. Hospital visits, hospital admissions, illness, uncertainties, recoveries, until one day he died. And after their son died, the mother kept his bedroom exactly as it had always been. Nothing was changed. Each morning she went into his room and opened the curtains, greeting him as if he were still there. She would stay a while and then leave to get on with her day, returning in the evening to say good night, to close the curtains, and to stay a while sitting on his bed, remembering him, mourning him. Her relationship with her son was profound and intact, but what had been shattered and changed irrevocably was how it was manifesting in the everyday. But the bond remained, and it was the bond which sustained her. It seems to me that sadly modern culture struggles to understand such, to our tidy minds, unusual expressions of grief, which take us beyond the ordinary. And yet, if we step back and look at human history, we find that grief has always been given far more space than it is today. In Ireland and parts of Scotland, there was once the tradition of keening, which I am happy to say is making a return in some places. Keening was often undertaken by women, relatives, female members of the wider community, and especially women whose role was to keen when deaths occurred. Women would gather around the body of the dead and begin a long, soul-stirring, emotion-shaking, long, piercing lament, unrestrained, a cry pulled up from deep within the body, sometimes with words, often simply, powerfully, the sound, a raw, unbroken wail, giving voice to the shock, the anguish, the love, and the unbearable absence which the deaths had brought to their community. It was grief allowed to speak in its fullest intensity, unrestrained, untrammelled. The keening women were not about tidy grief, and not about processing, not about being thoughtful. They opened grief. And through that sound, the whole community would recognize the depth of what and who had been lost. And while that tradition of keening has in the main been lost, although, as I say, it is returning in small groups, it is the same instinct we see in the parent sitting bare-arsed on the grave of her adult child. The same instinct in the young parents visiting their child's grave, bringing gifts, talking, lingering, mourning. It is the same instinct in the adult mother who daily, for years, greeted her son in the morning, said good night to him at night, stayed to talk, to remember, to miss. These expressions of love come from deep within ourselves, from the knowledge that love does not stop just because someone dies. The person may have gone physically, but the bond, the attachment remains. And so grief moves in us, turns us upside down and inside out in wild ways, which are raw and bewildering. But within that wildness and bewilderment, there is something immensely human, for grief reveals the depth of our attachment, our bonds one with another, showing us how deeply our lives are woven with one another, reminds us of the vulnerability at the heart of love. Because to love someone is to acknowledge, whether or not we want to, that one day we may have to grieve for them. And when that grief arrives, it comes with wildness, not simply as an idea, but as something visceral and threatening in our bodies and our hearts, taking us down to the bedrock of ourselves, of what it is to be human, to love, to lose, to remember, to hold our loved ones in our hearts, our bodies, our minds, and continuing to speak to them even though we know that they are not physically present, not because we don't know this, but because to talk to them and with them is an expression of our affection and our recognition of the continuing bond we have with them, which finds new forms, settling into the ordinarinesses of our daily life once again. We cannot have or know our loved ones as they were, but they come with us into our present and our future, shaping our lives, changing us. Thank you for listening.